Φίλοι μου, γεια σας. Καλώς ορίσατε σε μια άλλη έκδοση της εκπομπής «Κουβέντα με τον Βασίλη». Σήμερα νιώθω τέτοια τιμή και τέτοια χαρά, μια σπάνια χαρά που δεν την έχω τακτικά. Και θα καταλάβετε σε λίγο τι εννοώ. Έχω δύο πάρα πολύ χαρισματικές Ελληνίδες, οι οποίες έχουν γεννηθεί εδώ πέρα. Θαυμάζω αυτό που κάνουν. Είναι επαγγελματίες σε κάθε έννοια της λέξης. Γι' αυτό για μένα είναι μεγάλη χαρά που φιλοξενώ. Φιλοξενώ σήμερα τη Sandra Gionas και την Τίνα Poulimenou-Tzatzanis. Καλώς ορίσατε. Welcome to GrecaTV show. It's a great honor. Sandra, I think most Greek Canadians knowing you, not only because you've been producing how many years? 27 years?
27, 28, yeah.
28 years you've been producing one of the most credible journalistic shows in Canada. Our friends, they've taken the agenda and now for me, trying to interview such an experienced and talented person, I don't know how I decided to do it. In any event, I'm doing it. And I'm very glad that I met Tina today. I've seen her before, but we've never met in any meaningful way anywhere. Now, I should say from the beginning, both of you are members of the Hellenic Heritage Foundation's History Committee. So I want a few words for people that don't know what is that all about. What is the History Committee at HHF?
We began in 2017 with the sole purpose of putting together a year-long project to let not only Greek Canadians, but to let the community at large in Toronto know about the 1918 anti-Greek riots, which happened in 1918, of course. We were coming on the centenary, and we wanted to put together a program of walking tours, of a photo exhibit. We put together curriculum for the TDSB.
That was on Queen Street, wasn't it?
It took part on Yonge Street, on Queen Street. There was a documentary made about it called Violent August by filmmaker John Burry. But at the time, the board said to me, this is a great initiative. And we did it to engage the public. We did it because we were looking at the next generation of Greek Canadians, mostly people who were born here, and wondering how do we engage people with the HHF, the Hellenic Heritage Foundation, in a way that's meaningful to them. Because, we were born here, we have different priorities than perhaps somebody who came here in their youth and built their lives here. So we thought everybody's interested in their heritage. And so we did this, and it was so successful that the History Committee just kept going. And along the way, we picked up really interesting volunteers like the woman beside me. And we have about 25 volunteers now, and people from
is great.
All walks of life.
Amazing. And I know you're doing the podcasts with two wonderful professors, Bill
Molos and Sakis
Gekas from York University's History Chair, which is, of course, sponsored by HHF. Mm-hmm. And you've been doing these podcasts, and I've listened to them with so much interest. Not only you're talking about the Exodus. Is the first one? Was that the first one that you did? Or?
The first one actually.
We're going to show some, and so we'll give people a chance to hear it, but just a few 5 minutes or so they have an idea.
Hello. We're back with another podcast series. Last year, we brought you the idea of Greece. If you didn't pay attention in Greek school, that's the podcast for you. Learn about the Greek Revolution, why it happened, and why we tried to make it come alive for a diaspora audience. Then we produced Kore 670, the podcast, a 2-part series about the Kore exhibit at the Royal Ontario Museum, and we drew the curtains on the museum world. This time, we bring you a series about an important chapter in Greek history, and one that might touch many of you personally. Exodus, The Stories of 1922, is a 5-part podcast produced by the Hellenic Heritage Foundation's History Committee. I'm your host, Sandra Gionas. I'm a volunteer and board member with the HHF, the Hellenic Heritage Foundation. We've been around for about a quarter century, and we work to promote Hellenic education, culture, and heritage across Canada. And I am extremely proud of the amazing group of volunteers who belong to the History Committee. We're both amateur and professional historians, most of us born storytellers, and we've come together to work on public history projects, like this one. Our sponsor is Agape Greek Radio, and we're in their studios where we'll interview experts and regular folks from around the world. And I say we because I'm not alone. Sitting in the co-host chair with me today is Professor Sakis Gekas. Sakis is the Hellenic Heritage Foundation Chair in Modern Greek History at York University in Toronto. Welcome, Saki.
Hello, Sandra, and hello to all our listeners. It's great to be back. We have been tackling one important chapter in Greek history after another. This year, we are examining aspects of the history of 1922, since this is a commemoration of the 100 years anniversary of the burning of Smyrna and typically considered the Asia Minor catastrophe. And I have to say, it's always a turning point also in the way we teach modern Greek history, how it's punctuated before and after 1922. So it's not really anything anyone who's interested in Greek history in the 20th century can miss.
Today's episode is subtitled Loss. It's about the loss of homeland for so many Greeks 100 years ago. It's a loss about a sense of place. Today and over the next few episodes, we will try to talk to people, both experts in this area and people who have roots in this area through their ancestors, to try to get a sense of what Asia Minor was like 100 years ago for the Greeks living there and how they had a profound impact. Hello. I'm Sandra, Gionas of the Hellenic Heritage Foundation, and we're back with another season of our podcast series, HHF Presents, where we re-examine Greek history, but from a diaspora perspective. In previous seasons, we covered the Greek Revolution, the Kore exhibit at the Royal Ontario Museum, which was a look at archaic Greek art, and last year's Exodus, the stories of 1922 and the expulsion of Greeks from Asia Minor. This season's podcast is called Εδώ Πολυτεχνείο. I'm joined by my co-host this season, Bill Molos. Bill is the director and research lead of the HHF Greek Canadian Archives at York University. Now, prior to this, he was an assistant professor, Division of Arts and Humanities at New York University, Abu Dhabi, which I'd love to hear about someday. That's where he specialized in Greek history. Welcome, Bill.
Thanks so much, Sandra. I'm really excited to participate in this important public history project.
Okay, first question. What does Polytechnio mean to you?
It's Masada, it's Thermopylae, it's self-sacrifice in defense of one's values. The Polytechnio occupation, it's one of these moments when waves of discontent crystallize spontaneously into this massive countrywide protest. And people participate for different reasons. Some want academic freedom, some desire popular sovereignty. Many are just opposed to the surveillance and the torture. But they participate. And they participate knowing they would be beaten, arrested, tortured, or worse. To me, it's a story of heroism, but also a story of hope and resilience. In any case, I think it's one worth telling.
We're bringing to you the story of the student uprising at the Polytechnio in Athens, one of the universities in that city. And we are going to tell you the entire story, starting with the years after the Greek World War and the Civil War and how that set up the politics of what was to happen in the 60s, and cover the event itself and what happened after. But because we're a diaspora podcast, we chose a very Greek title. So tell me, Bill, what does Εδώ Πολυτεχνείο mean?
It is a very Greek title. Εδώ Πολυτεχνείο literally translates to here Polytechnic, or here is the Polytechnic.
Well, the first one was called The Idea of Greece, and we pitched it to the Greek government, which at the time was looking for projects to commemorate the 200th anniversary of the Republic. So we put together this 7-episode podcast, which looked at Greek history from a diaspora perspective. And our tagline was, not what you learned in Greek school. Because I think, a credit to a whole generation of Greek school teachers who taught us, but, as we went on in life, I think, realized that we had a very basic kind of education. So this was a chance for us to revisit that seminal moment in our, in the history of the Patria and look at it from our own lens, right? Not as Greeks, but as Canadians of Greek descent, and go into the story that way.
Which most people like you will relate much more than if it was done the traditional, produced by Greeks or spoken by Greeks, which is great. And then you did one for Polytechnico as well.
We did. After that, we did a short one on the Kore exhibit, which we brought to the ROM, and then we did Exodus, the Stories of 1922. Yes. And then last year in the fall, we released Edo Polytechnico, which was about the student siege of the Athens Polytechnic, which was a really seminal event. It was a really big event because it was the first big mass public protest against the junta. Yes. It didn't bring about its downfall, but it led to steps which started to make the dictatorship unravel.
Well, I know all about it. I was a young student at U of T, president of the Hellenic University Society, and also Students for a Free Greece. So I know all about it. And now, Tina, you were born here as well, right? I should ask Sandra later, because I'm related indirectly to her family, which I want to refer in a moment. But you were born here of both Greek parents?
Nope, I was actually born in Niagara Falls. My father was born in Greece and emigrated to Canada in 1961 when he was 16. And then he met my mother in Niagara Falls, who was born and raised and actually descends from Mary Ball, the mother of George Washington and the United Empire Loyalists that came up to the Niagara region.
Yes.
And he met my mother and they got married. And of course, she decided that, she needed to know what people were saying about her. So she taught herself Greek. And they went to Greece for 3 months, and she would be the one that helped us with our Greek school homework when we were kids.
Yes.
And so, I just always was
and
very
you
much
speak
involved.
Greek. Sandra does, but I understand why you feel more comfortable.
Ναι. Μιλώ ελληνικά.
Μιλάς ελληνικά.
Ναι, σίγουρα. Πήγα και στο Πανεπιστήμιο του Τορόντο εδώ.
Πού έμαθες ελληνικά?
Πήγα ελληνικό σχολείο όταν ήμουν μικρή στην Νιαγάρα, αλλά μόνο μέχρι την 6η τάξη. Και μετά πήγα Ελλάδα.
Σχολείο της Εκκλησίας ήταν ή ιδιωτικό?
Της κοινότητας.
Της κοινότητας.
Ναι, στο Νιαγάρα, αλλά είχαν μόνο μέχρι την 6η τάξη. Αλλά επειδή πήγα στην Ελλάδα στα 12, γνώρισα κάτι φίλους εκεί και κάνουμε αλληλογραφία. Και έτσι νομίζω κράτησα τα ελληνικά μέχρι να έρθω στο Τορόντο και πήγα στο Πανεπιστήμιο του Τορόντο και σπούδαζα ξένες γλώσσες, γαλλικά, ισπανικά και έκανα και minor στα Modern Greek. Και είχα πολύ καλοί καθηγητές εκεί. Είχα ο Professor Δανίλα, μου το ήξερες από το UT.
Τον είχα και εγώ, τον Γιώργο.
Ναι,
και είχαμε γίνει πολύ καλοί φίλοι.
Και εκεί άρχισα να διαβάσω ποίηση, λογοτεχνία.
Και ήταν τρομερός, πολύ καλός ήταν ο Γιώργος και στη ποίηση και στη λογοτεχνία.
Ναι. Και εκεί, that was the spark για μένα.
Σάντρα, και εσύ έμαθες ελληνικά. Και εσύ.
Up till
όχι
grade
μόνο
9.
στο σπίτι, αλλά και πήγες σχολείο.
Yeah.
Και να πω ότι ο άντρας σου ήταν μαθητής μου στο ελληνικό σχολείο στην ελληνική κοινότητα του 1972.
That's correct. It's a small world.
Και ο πατέρας σου ήταν ένας από τους θερμούς υποστηρικτές μου. Ο πεθερός σου, συγγνώμη, στην πολιτική μου καμπάνια.
Yes, that's true. I actually remember your campaign because
you're too young then.
Oh no, my father lined up to vote for you, and I remember late at night lining up with him before the polls closed.
Yeah, time goes by.
Yeah.
Tina, Sandra told me something that I didn't know before we started this interview. And she told me that you translate into English Greek poets.
I have done that because I do this year I'll be hosting my 3rd event, but originally in 2019 I held an event that was to celebrate Greek women poets. So I decided I needed to have a program in case there were non-Greeks at the event. I wanted to make sure that the poems were accessible. And so I started translating. If I couldn't find sort of English translations that had already been done, then I worked on the translations myself. So then we did another event last year that the HHF sponsored.
What kind of events you do?
So
regarding poetry?
those were the main ones. So the first one was the poetry event, and it was more or less, we're lucky we live in a city that has such a very rich and vibrant cultural scene in the Greek community.
Yes.
I mean, every weekend there's concerts, there's theater, there's music performances. You can go to restaurants and have live music. There's a lot going on. But for me, I wasn't seeing some events that I wanted to experience, and one of those was hearing live poetry, Greek poetry being read. So I thought, well, why not try planning it myself? So the first one was a celebration of women poets. And then in 2020, I had planned to have a celebration of poetry and music, which was more Melopi Menapi Mata. So we had it all organized. I had the musicians lined up, everything, and then COVID hit.
So you organized musical
so it's a combination of music and poetry. So that was the second one.
Yes, I understand. Έντεχνη μουσική.
We do Έντεχνο Music Night, so that's a new thing this year. So last year we had a successful poetry event, and then while speaking with the musicians that performed at it, we were kind of saying, I wish we had, would love to have an event where we just have Έντεχνο music. And I said, okay, let's put one together. And so with the musicians from Hijaz, along with my husband and my son, who both played in my husband had a Greek rock band back in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And then my son plays in a rock band. So we put the two groups together, and I gave them my wish list of all the Έντεχνο songs I wanted to hear, and they added some of their own, and we did our first one on December 2nd, sold out, which was amazing. And then we had our second one February 10th. And now we have another one coming up on March 30th.
Anything that we at GrecaTV can do for you, for your events.
Oh, thank you.
Whether advertise them free of charge, it will be an honor for us to be involved in activities. This is the purpose why I created GrecaTV in the first place.
Yeah.
And Sandra told me a secret. She said, don't say it to anybody, but I'll say it anyway, so I can prove to her how well I can keep a secret. And that is that you just finished a novel.
I did. I did finish writing a novel. Sandra has read it as I wanted a good editorial eye to look through it. And I'm currently in the process of finding an agent and a publisher that will take it on. And it does take place in Greece and in Toronto.
And I am anxious to read it as well.
Thank you.
Φίλοι μας, τώρα καταλαβαίνετε τον ενθουσιασμό μου που είπα στην αρχή, πόσο ευχαριστημένος είμαι που έχουμε αυτή τη συνάντηση απόψε. Sandra, you've been a journalist most of your adult life, and how is journalism today? How does one become a good journalist? Because you produced one of the best journalistic shows in the country. There's nothing yellow about it, and it's a tribute to you and Steve. With the agenda.
And the other producers that worked on
it. There. What makes a good journalist?
Curiosity, and that's Mr. Pakin has in spades. He's just a naturally curious person. It helps to be curious. It helps to be really well-read and to get your news from a variety of sources. One of the things Steve taught me early in my career, because I had been with him with the show Studio 2 that preceded the agenda, to not be cynical. And that's so important. And my generation, I remember going to journalism school. I went there for grad studies at Ryerson after I did my undergrad at U of T. And our professors would complain that my generation was so cynical. And we probably were. Steve is the least cynical person you would ever meet. And he really taught me to respect people who go into public life. It's not easy. He's written a series of books about this, right?
About every premier practically.
Exactly. And I got to see it firsthand with the people we would meet, and I saw the toll that it would take on people as well. I mean, not every politician is built the same. But it's a huge sacrifice. And I'm now working on a project with a group called Informed Opinions, which is launching a campaign called Balance the Power. And that is to get more women into politics, because of all the nations in the world, Canada ranks 62nd in terms of female representation. And what I got to witness, especially in the last part of my career, is with social media, politics really takes its toll on women. Mm-hmm. Yes. It's a very horrible place to be in for the kind of vitriol that they're exposed to online. And so politics, like journalism, is in a really precarious place right now. We've got a lot of news outlets just in the past few months that have been shut down.
Yes.
We have a lot of journalists out of work.
And many are killed during the war.
Exactly.
This time, I mean, it's awful.
And we couldn't need properly trained journalists now more than ever, as we see a lot of people lose faith in our democratic institutions.
Social media, it's something that surely affects true journalism. Do you think that it replaces it, or merely it's a nonsense that will go away?
I wouldn't call it a nonsense, because it's a very serious entity that has replaced journalism, unfortunately, for a lot of people. They look at various feeds in social media and think that that's news, not knowing who is presenting that information and how they've been trained. It has completely changed the way my field works, and it has also disrupted the economic model for journalism, and that people got used to getting their news for free, and the ad revenue that used to support journalists is no longer there, and it's a very serious thing.
Yes, absolutely. And even journalists nowadays, I think, instead of joining a network, an establishment in the media world, they have their own blogs, they create their own channels in YouTube and everything, and they become themselves part of the new era of what journalism should be. And I think that's not a good thing either, in many respects.
In some ways it's okay. In some ways it's good, because as a lot of these big corporations shut down local journalism,
Yes.
and that is dangerous, because, who's there to hold truth to power? A lot of independent journalists have been filling that void. It's not ideal.
In that respect, I can see how beneficial it is, because we see corporations buying every radio station in the country,
and then
every
shutting them down.
newspaper, and then they shut them down, and then journalists are out of work suddenly. So I can understand in that respect, sure, they feel a need.
There's definitely a need.
A need.
I'm really worried about this. I'm worried about seeing the disappearance of so many local news outlets. I'm worried about seeing so many of my colleagues having lost their jobs recently here in Canada and in the States. It's not a good time. Something has to evolve. Something has to change.
Yes.
I don't know what that something is.
You had a lot of interns where you worked. What would you advise students that want to follow, journalism nowadays? So what kind of advice one can give them? It's so difficult, I think.
It's very difficult. They have to be super committed. A lot of them give up and they leave the field. I was very lucky at TVO because we really got the highest quality of interns that there were. I mean, by buying into public television and by buying into long-form journalism, you already have a certain kind of student. And it's tough. They need to be resilient.
Yes.
And they need to have perseverance, because it's very difficult.
Tina, you got involved in the Greek community. You were born here, grew up here, and yet both Sandra and you got involved in Greek affairs. You found an interest. You're doing great work with HHF. Why do you think most of the Canadian boards that are in the main society, they don't get involved? What keeps them aloof? What makes them aloof, in your opinion? Why they don't get involved?
I think it gets very challenging if you don't have a connection to Greece, for sure. I was visiting Greece from a young age, and even after I got married, my husband was born in Greece, and we took our children there every 2 years. 2 years old, 3 years old, 5 years old. We go very regularly. I leave actually on Saturday to go for a month. So that built a connection for me. I've always been very connected to Greece and always been very interested in the culture and the language. And I think maybe for a lot of people, there's so many other things that take your time, right? If you are interested in sports, if you are interested in dance, if you were interested in other things, it may draw your attention away. And there's only so many hours in a day. And I think for a lot of parents who have young kids, if it's between, hockey practice and Greek school, they may choose hockey practice because they may see more of a future in it.
So I understand the point of connection with these trips to Greece. It's a vital point, and I think the HHF is sponsoring some of those trips, right?
Yes, correct. Heritage Greece, through the university programs that we sponsor. And students should take those opportunities as much as they can because, they offer a really special opportunity to expose yourself to things you might not see when you go on your own by experts. It's really an amazing experience. And you build lifelong friendships.
In your opinion, either one of you, we see more Canadian-born Greeks and professionals come into the fold of HHF, either in the administration or in running some of the committees as volunteers, and they certainly attend all the events, whether it's the gala, whether it's some other event, whether it's a golf tournament. You attract that kind of Greek public in our parochia. Why the rest of them? Why do you think they don't join even there in large numbers? Or what do we need to change in our parochia that can make it more attractive for Canadian-born? We have so many scientists, and hopefully soon we're going to start a program with a Canadian-born journalist. She'll be interviewing personalities in every field of endeavor in society, whether they're scientists or in the media or whatever. Hopefully programs like that will tell them, we are Greeks. We have something. We're going to interview you. We want you to network. So what are the things that we need to do as a Greek parochia to bring those people back?
Well, that's a very tough question, and that's something the HHF asked itself as it started to transition from our founders, who were mostly born in Greece, to the generation that largely leads now, which is mostly born here. I think you have to make it relevant. For the HHF, just as an organization, funding Greek language programs, funding education was very important. It was the reason why we exist. But going beyond that and funding community cultural initiatives like the ones Tina is staging, or funding public history projects, made the organization and what we do a little bit more accessible to more people. People who might not have been interested in Greek school, or, they might not have been interested to keep their ties to the community the way their parents did through silogi. They didn't have those same connections to people. So you've got to build new community that reflects people out there. Not everybody's going to join, right? They just don't have an interest. Our interest right now, the HHFs and for Tina and myself, is we're looking beyond our generation. We're looking at our kids, right? Because they are the next generation. The HHF has the Next Generation Committee, which basically has built a community of young people to network and to do fun events and to kind of bring them in that way slowly. But you've got to look for ways that would appeal to somebody whose yaya or papu came here, right? They have a different experience of being Greek than you might or I might. And so what would interest them? I know a lot of public history projects that we do, like the podcast or the walking tours. Or sports. Are ways to engage them. But we have to think of new and creative ways to build community that makes it relevant for more people.
I can tell you, I'm one of the first 4 or 5 founding members of the HHF. And I remember in our first meetings, all we aspired to do at that time, I specifically was saying to the people that were somewhat wealthy, I said, why you contribute to non-Greek organizations for their charity work and everything, and you don't spend a penny in the Greek community? At least we should sponsor education, Greek schools. That's the only thing we aspired at that time. We didn't think that it's going to go into these other fields. That's why I'm so proud of the HHF and the great work they're doing.
But I have to say, Bill, I'm very fortunate because I am auditing a course at U of T, which is part of the Greek program that we fund at the University of Toronto, the Hellenic program.
Yes.
And 25% of the students are of Greek descent. If you look at the rest of the class, it looks like Canada because they're interested. And
Yes.
I think that beyond just doing things for the community, I think that if we spread Greekness to the rest of Canada, that's a good thing too.
I'm totally with you. I think that may do the trick, because when I speak to my kids and my grandkids, they are of Greek descent. They have a father who spent most of his life in Greek affairs in the community or in politics or whatever. Yet there's not a specific thing for them to be attracted. And that always puzzles me, and I say, we gotta find something. And doing, as you said, the Greekness, bring it to their society, to Canadian events. Because for us, in my generation, we're going fast, what's after that? And that's why I thought I should create GrecaTV in my old age, in my retirement, and hopefully I can have people, as I said in the beginning, to produce shows here and possibly, make it a vehicle for them to spread the Greekness beyond our borders.
But, the level of engagement doesn't have to be absolute. Maybe you go to a Greek restaurant once a year or you go see a Greek film. That's okay.
Or for Easter.
Or for Easter. That's okay, right?
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Okay, tell me what's in the works in the History Committee now for the immediate future.
Okay, we have started working on a new podcast series. It's the 50th anniversary of the invasion of Cyprus. And so we're using that as an opportunity to look at Cyprus itself, because I think I, as a Greek Canadian, don't really know that much about Cyprus. So it's an opportunity for all of us to learn more about Cyprus, to learn about what happened 50 years ago, and to understand how Cypriot culture is distinct and rich, and just to, how to have a better understanding. We're also creating a new walking tour of the West End.
The West End.
Yep. It'll be more focused this time on the working history of Greeks, more of the labor history, which is really fascinating. And we're always busy. We're sponsoring history tournaments.
The HHF recommends.
HHF recommends. We started a new initiative where every first of the month, we not only wish you kalomina, but we give you a recommendation of something Greek, be it the arts or something online.
Something to read. Or... Well, this is great. The work you're doing as volunteers, it's amazing.
Thank you.
I admire you both, and I want to thank you both that you are involved in our community, and I wish you all the best. And thank you for giving me the honor to have you here today with me.
Thank you, Bill. Good luck with GrecaTV.
Thank you. Φίλοι μας, δυστυχώς τελείωσε η ωραία αυτή παρέα και συζήτηση. Ελπίζω να έχουμε πολλές άλλες στο μέλλον. Τώρα καταλαβαίνετε την αγωνία μου πού θα πάει η GrecaTV στο μέλλον. Είναι ακριβώς τέτοιες εκπομπές που θα κάνουν την GrecaTV να αγαπηθεί και να διοικείται από τα παιδιά μας και τα εγγόνια μας. Γιατί διαφορά θα χαθούμε. Θα χαθούμε μέσα στην αφομοίωση και δεν υπάρχει άλλος τρόπος για να διατηρήσουμε τη κουλτούρα μας, τη θρησκεία μας, ό,τι καλό έχουμε σαν Έλληνες από την αρχαιότητα και μετά, αλλά και τώρα, παρά μόνο αν έχουμε δομές τέτοιες όπως το HHF, όπως το GrecaTV, όπως οι εφημερίδες μας, τα ραδιόφωνά μας, οτιδήποτε είναι κάτι, οι εκδηλώσεις οι πολιτιστικές που θα μας βοηθήσουν να διατηρήσουμε στις νέες γενιές με τη γλώσσα τη δική τους. Δεν μας ενδιαφέρει αν μιλάνε καλά ελληνικά ή όχι, αρκεί να έρχονται κάπου σε ένα ελληνικό σπίτι, είτε λέγεται εκκλησία, είτε λέγεται ραδιόφωνο, είτε λέγεται εφημερίδα, είτε λέγεται σύλλογος. Μέχρι την άλλη φορά, γεια σας.